This is episode 13, entitled Work, an assistant professor of curriculum studies and the philosophy of education. What is the purpose of life? Hello world, welcome to the show We Work, Rest and Play. This is where we dissect, decipher and demystify people's work and their lives outside of work. I'm Dan, your host, and welcome to episode 13. We continue on from the previous episode and are talking work with Gonzalo, where we continue going deep and getting real about what it's like to work as a university professor at one of the premier universities in the United States. In this episode, we go into things like what his typical day as an academic looks like, how he started in music and ended up landing in the field of education, how his interest in Buddhism led to him pursuing a PhD, and we go even deeper, so deep that we even stumble across that question. What is the purpose of life? And Gonzalo actually gives a very, very good answer. So you ready to open your mind? Sounds exciting? Here's episode 13. He's pushing it with the rhymes. What's a typical day like for yourself as a professor at a university? So you are teaching at a university in the Midwest of the United States. But could you describe a typical day for yourself? What it's like to be in your field?
So because our students are, many of them, most of them, are teachers who work full time. Most of the courses in the College of Education, which is where I teach, are offered in the evenings.
Ah, right.
So typically, I wake up early.
About what time?
These days I've been waking up at 5.
5 a.m. Wow. Okay.
And my wife is a teacher. She was a high school teacher, so her workday starts early. And I wake up at 5 and I spend about 2 hours, 1.5 hours before she wakes up alone. And I do some chanting, some Buddhist meditation at that time of the day.
Right.
I do some writing, like writing, original writing, my philosophical writing. And somehow that kind of quiet hours, it's dark before people are up.
That philosophical writing, is that for you personally or is that part of your work?
Some of these things they become chapters or articles or the beginning of a book or something. But I write the type of thing that would be the very early stages of a thought. I like to do that kind of thing early in the morning. Then I make breakfast and my wife wakes up and she gets ready to go to work and I walk the dogs or sometimes I take her to work. And then I'm at home. I have a kind of office at home and I do work from home. It involves, if it's a day I teach a class, there's a lot of preparation for the class. There might be papers that I have to give comments and grade the students submitted. I might have to prepare like a slideshow PowerPoint for something I'm going to present later in the day. Or I'm reading for what we're going to discuss in class. And I take notes. There's a lot of, like most people, like email type of stuff. So we are communicating with students are asking questions or colleagues or editors and things like that.
That's interesting. So these days, now this is something that I'm curious. Do you get a lot of questions from your students via email, via direct contact?
Yeah.
Because I think that's something which I'm noticing that's very different these days than back when I was in school or uni, where students didn't have as much direct the potential of directly contacting their teacher or their lecturer. But now everyone's got an email address, everyone's got a web page.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems like the teacher's job or the lecturer's job or the professor's job will be much more difficult. Not necessarily worse or better, but I think you get a lot more interaction with your students, which could be a good thing. But I think it also takes a lot of toll on your time.
You have to manage it. I don't have that much experience. I've been doing this for only a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So with experience, you'll start discovering things you can do. But something you can do, for example, is if an email requires a response that it's like more than a few sentences, I don't want to be typing for half an hour, a response to an email. So I would send an email saying, well, let's talk in person, after class or something. And something else I do is that there are questions that students have that are the type of questions that might be useful for other students. So I respond to questions during class itself, so everybody can hear, So in that sense, sometimes the communication with students help me make the classes better because I know what they're thinking about, so then I can talk about it in class.
Very good.
So because we have dogs and I'm home during the day, I do a lot of work from home. So I will go to the office in the afternoon.
Is that's typically after lunch?
After lunch.
You'll have lunch at home?
I have lunch at home.
Right.
And then, so then in the afternoon, I spend a few hours in the office, and that's the time for meetings with colleagues, for projects, for administrative stuff. And then, and also have my office hours. During those hours, students can kind of stop by and talk and about anything. And then around 5, I head out to the classroom, and we have long. Each class session is 3 hours.
Wow! Straight through? Do you guys have a break in the middle?
We have a short break in the middle. Yeah. So 3 hours, and it's once a week. Each class meets once a week for 3 hours. So the good thing is that I have to show up strictly to work only twice a week for 3 hours each time. I'm not required to be at the office or anything like that. And it's
sorry, your classes are from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
5:30 through 8:30, 8:45. There's a lot of autonomy, freedom in the job. So I may sometimes part of the job is to travel. You go to give talks and go to conferences. Sometimes you have to do one of the class sessions is online, or if you have to be abroad. And
that is interesting. So you're saying you've got a lot of freedom and autonomy. So on a day where you are teaching in the evening, it sounds like you're working like the whole day.
Yeah.
Like from the morning. I mean, after you do your morning ritual stuff, after breakfast, you're working. So
there are long hours. Yeah,
so it's long hours.
But you also like I have the flexibility. So yes, I'm working all the time, but I also have the flexibility to do things mostly whenever I can or want to. So that's why I can walk the dogs during the day.
Of course.
Or I do laundry during the day. And I have to wait until the end of the day to do those things. I get to do whenever I want.
So that's good.
Yeah.
So, but typically it sounds like you don't really time box. Like I'm going to work between this time and this time. It sounds very fluid, very flexible.
For me, it's like that. Not everybody has that way of working, but for me, it's like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on a day you're teaching, say from 5:30 to 8:30 ish, typically on a day, what time would you say you actually start working in the morning? Is it like 9 a.m. at home, or is it 7 a.m.? When are you sort of in the I'm working mindset? Oh, I'm sure it varies per day, but roughly on a typical day.
I would say 9 a.m. is,
9 a.m.-ish, right? So that's okay. You're starting to focus on your work stuff. And then after you finish teaching 8:45, 9 p.m., are you still hanging back and answering students' questions, or that's it, everyone goes home?
That's it.
And then
they don't even want to be there. Nobody wants to be there.
Because even the students have had a full day of work.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone's just get out of there. Great. And then a day you're not working, this may be a lot harder to answer. So on a day you're not teaching, your day would typically still roughly start 9 a.m.?
Yes. However, what I've been doing recently is that the first day after, so let's say I'm teaching classes Mondays and Wednesdays, Thursday is like my weekend. I don't wait until Saturday to relax. So that's the day I take it easy.
Is the reason you chose Thursdays because that coincides with, say, your wife's schedule as well, or is this just
whatever is the first day after my last class? Can't wait.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I'm still up early. It works for me to have that regular.
Now that makes sense. I'll come back to that in the rest segment, but that's very interesting. I like that. So you sort of mentioned. Hang on a sec. So if you're teaching from 5:30 to 8:30, when do you have dinner? Before seems too early and after seems too late.
Yeah, I have it too late.
Okay.
Yeah. I like to have dinner with my wife. And she cooks. So I go home and we have dinner late.
Yeah, that's a late dinner night.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Not ideal.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because normally, what time would you normally have dinner?
I don't know, 7,
right? But on a teaching day, it'd be like 9.
Right.
9:30.
Or 9:30 more like that.
Gotcha. Geez, the things we do. So you've essentially gone over a typical day. Now, how does that change if that day was like, yeah, that was a great day. I had a good day from a work perspective. How would your typical day change? How is it different if it's like, that was an awesome day? If there is such a thing.
Yeah. Good days, the days that I think were good days are either days with a lot of meeting people and meetings that they feel like meaningful and productive. And being an academic is such a lonely profession. You spend a lot of hours just on your own, reading and writing, and so you treasure the human contact. So sometimes you have like meetings during the day for whatever, and when those go well, you get a sense that this is a very productive day. Or days when you accomplish something, like the day for example, I finished a paper and submitted. That's a good feeling.
That'd be hugely satisfying.
Yeah.
Because if you're submitting a research paper, how much time have you spent on it?
It varies, and I
months, weeks,
months.
Wow.
I've never written something in weeks, months. Yeah. I hope to improve and be able to do that, but not yet.
No, by the sounds of it, I can't imagine it being any quicker than months, because the need for thoroughness, like you said, and just the amount of thinking that you have.
Yeah, some people are able to produce things quickly because they have all of the groundwork done already. You don't have to read everything again. Like you're writing more than several. Some people, that's your area of expertise. So you already read most things. You have to keep up. New things come up, you read them. But I'm not particularly fast. I'm slow, so it takes me months. And I'm never working on one thing exclusively. I have like many things going on. So
of course.
Yeah, and when class goes well, that's awesome. That's really exciting. All my classes I teach, are always seminar style, which is a conversation. I don't prepare like a lecture for the whole 3 hours. I prepare short things, a short slideshow to explain a concept or something like that. Most of the class is a conversation with the students around the table. So I don't know how it's going to go. It all depends on what they bring to the table, and so when that goes well, it's very exciting.
How many students do you have in your classes, bro?
Between, I would say, 14 and 30.
That's a good size.
It's a good size, yeah. Yeah.
Is that a conscious thing to keep the class sizes small, or is it that's just the way it's panned out?
It's both. It's both. Part of the reason classes are smaller is because the advanced degrees are like that. They're not so many people doing a doctorate, but also when I teach undergraduate courses, I think the university wants to keep it class size small. Yeah, it's part of what they are about. Some universities have the large lectures, but what they want to do is to do that.
You mentioned that your day is a good day. One reason that your day was a good day is if your class goes well. What does that mean? When you say a class goes well, how do you gauge that? Is it the level of interaction? Is it the response from the students? Or, is there a way you can tell? Of course, there's a way you can tell, but what indicates that your class has gone well?
Well, I typically teach texts that I know very well, and I've had conversations about those texts with experts, and we've dissected these books, articles from every angle possible, and so I kind of have a sense of what questions, what topics about these texts are very exciting to me. I have like the questions that are really confusing, and there are questions that are like not so interesting, or that when it's the first time you read it, that's what stands out, but quickly you realize it's not so interesting. So so when the discussion in class goes in directions that are promising, exciting, I know, because those are there are aspects of those texts that you've identified them already. That's exciting when that happens. Or sometimes students really surprise me. They come with ways of reading the text I never thought of. And that's so exciting. But also, that class goes well means that just kind of good mood, people are happy, that's important. It's tough. I mean, I don't know what your experience was. I remember being a student. Sometimes it's not. It's fun.
Of course.
Yeah.
It can often be a drag.
Yes.
So to speak. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so now just to flip it, and it may just be the inverse of what you've just said, but how would your typical day change if it was one of those really crappy days? And you sit back and just like, that day sucked. What would cause that?
Well, a bad day, for me, probably would look like when I get stuck. Like there's something I gotta get done, and I wish I could be doing anything else except that, and I just get stuck.
When you say stuck in thought process, or
yeah, typically writing brings me down, and there are like you don't want to get stuck. You like if it's not flowing, if you like every sentence you write, the moment you write it, you hate it, and it's like that. You don't, you just go to the gym or actually switch and do something else. There are many other things on your list of things to do you could be doing. And some days I'm smart and I can catch that, but sometimes I get like obsessed and I just want to put. I gotta finish this thing, and I get stuck. Those are bad days. It affects my mood. I get depressed.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's amazing. I think writers have and people have to write a lot like yourselves. I just don't know how you guys do it. It's like me at work just trying to write a damn email is hard enough, let alone a paper or preparing for a class or whatever. But that's crazy. Your lunch times. You mentioned you generally have it at home. You mentioned gym. You mentioned other stuff. Is there something you typically do during your lunchtime, or you just eat and get out?
I think sometimes I watch TV. Yeah, the computer. Often I'm trying to think. So I would eat at home. That would be common.
Yeah, I guess this question is more relevant for those who are working in an office.
Right,
and I'm curious what they do. You're at home, so I guess it's
just more of the same. I'm like,
you can just do whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess is there a typical thing that you would do around your lunchtime? You throw the laundry in, or you run off to the gym, or cook your food, eat, and then get ready for work?
That's what I do.
Yeah.
Cook my food, get ready to work. Yeah.
Sure. Now you've touched on this quite a lot, and which I admire quite a lot actually. But I'm going to ask it quite specifically here. What would you say it is that you love about your job? If someone asks you what do you love about your job, it can be one thing, it can be a number of things. How would you answer that question?
I get to have really good conversations because of my job. That's the best part.
Yeah.
That's the reason why.
When you say, what do you mean by great conversation? Is it the style of conversation, or is it the topic of the conversation? What do you mean by great conversation?
So I mean, obviously, I'm interested in this subject matter, and it's exciting to talk to other people. When you share an interest and you get to talk about that, and you get to share what you're excited about, that's really good. I'm also very interested in people, but I'm so bad at small talk, and I'm not being very funny, so it's hard to connect.
I think you're pretty funny.
Is that right? I don't know. It's just it's not as easy for me to connect with people in casual social context. But what's great about teaching is that you get plenty of chances to, especially a class like this where we might be what I do, which is the themes are connected to life, and we are in class discussion. People share about their experience with learning and teaching, and so I get to learn about people and connect, and doesn't happen as easy in this casual,
that makes sense,
context.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to flip it. What do you hate about your job?
It doesn't pay as well.
Well said.
Yeah. Besides that, I hate having to grade. I hate the fact that there's somebody, the students are doing all this work, and I gotta tell them it's worth 10 points or 8 points. It's ridiculous. You have to do it. It's part of the deal, but I hate that.
So is it the fact that you think that the work that they produce is of value in itself, therefore it shouldn't need to be graded, or is it just the mundaneness of having to do that? What do you mean by you hate having to grade?
Well, it's what I hate about it is that grades are for not for the student, they're for other people. So when I say the student got a B in the class, that's not feedback for the student. for the student, the best feedback is it could be specific. Like, you clearly did this well, you could do this better.
Right.
And that's useful. If they want to improve, they have now some guidance. But when I say it's a B, that's for like the university that's going to decide, well, you're going to get the degree or not, or that's for a future employer or whatever. And in an ideal world, that is none of their business. It's other people. The learning should be about people that are involved in it. From the outside, out of context, in a way, it corrupts the experience.
Interesting.
Now, for example, I'm happy to talk about the student when I write a letter of recommendation, and I'm listed as a reference for a job, and I get a call. I can share what I think about this person, but that's different than just a number. Or I understand the use. I mean, it's convenient and efficient, and when you're dealing with thousands of people and you got to sort them out, something like a number really helps. But it does corrupt the experience.
Very interesting. It strangely seems very consistent with your whole mindset around the whole curriculum and education philosophy. I think that's I think when someone is speaking in a way where their thinking, their lifestyle, their opinions, I'll say it's very holistic in the sense that whether you're talking about work, whether you're talking about your likes, your dislikes, it's all very consistent. And personally, I think that's quite rare. I think, and if you, in the sense that it aligns very well with one's career. I find a lot of people are working in one particular way. They're living a particular way at work, or the values of what they are having to live out at their workplace is different to, say, outside of work. And I think people who have the opportunity to line them up are very fortunate.
One of my favorite philosophers, American philosopher called John Dewey. He wrote a lot about democracy. And the way we think about democracy usually is, like elections, free, equal elections. Or sometimes we think about democracy in terms of like equality, like distribution of resources and opportunities and influence. And he, agreed with all of that. But he also said that one of the features of a democracy, when you have a real democratic society, he didn't think there was any actual perfect democracy. He thought, we are getting there, but it's not ideal. But one of the things you would look for is in a democratic society, work and leisure, work and play should not be two separate things. When they're separated, when life is fragmented like that, that's a sign that there's no real democracy, because when these two are separated, it means that some people are not enacting their values. You're enacting someone else's values. That's why it feels jarring. And then that's what happens when that's why I hate grading, because that's not what I value. Someone else is valuing that, and I have to do it. That is.
Wow, that's really interesting. How do you spell Dewey?
Dewey.
Oh, right. Dewey. John Dewey. Fascinating. That is so true. That is, wow. My mind is once again blown away. That's very cool. Right, okay, so I'm going to ask another question now. Here, what you're doing is actually quite specific. Obviously it needs to be, because you're a professor in that field. Now, when and how did you decide that you were going to work in this field?
So I was in graphic design with my field.
Was that your first?
I tried a few things, like I wanted to be a musician and try different things, but like never stick to it for too long. The graphic design was the first thing I was serious about.
Okay.
I just kept going with it, and it's great. I love it. I actually that was my job all through graduate school. For 20 years. So I was doing that, and I had this opportunity to go to California to study at Soka University, and I was very excited about it because Justin and I we were part of the first graduating class, so the school didn't exist. It was a very exciting kind of adventure, and so in my mind was like, I'm gonna go to California and be part of this experience, and it'll be sort of like a 4-year sabbatical type of thing,
Okay, so I'll just stop you there for a second. So you were doing graphic design for 20 years, did you say?
Well, as a job, I've been doing that. That's how I paid the bills.
While you were going to graduate school.
Right. But as a student at the uni, only for 3 years, I did that.
So,
but then I kept working as a graphic designer,
while you were studying.
While I was studying other things, in the US.
And then the 3 years that you studied graphic design, was that at the tail end of that 20 years, or was that
at the beginning?
At the beginning,
yeah.
And then with that knowledge, you
right,
okay, and then obviously so your graduate. Actually, let's do this. So you've studied a number of degrees. What are those degrees?
So from 97 through 2001, I was studying graphic design.
Yep.
In University of Buenos Aires.
Right.
And at the time, I was thinking, well, this is education. That's what it is. You're training for a profession, and then I go to California, and I'm thinking, well, this is be an opportunity to kind of enrich my life, learn about other things, and what I was doing when I was there, I remember having this feeling that like, this is actually what I enjoy the most.
Did you end up in California and then decide to go to Soka, or did you go to California?
I would go to California to go to Soka.
To go to Soka.
I applied to the program from Argentina. I was accepted, and that's how I.
How did you find out about Soka?
I found out about Soka because I'm a Buddhist.
You're right.
Member of Soka Gakkai International, and the founder of Soka University is the leader of this Buddhist organization. So I was Buddhist, so I knew that the school was opening because of that.
So you were a member of Soka Gakkai even before you decided to go to Soka University?
That's right. I was in high school. I started practicing Buddhism.
Okay. So this actually for the listeners, we talk a lot about Soka University and Soka Gakkai with Justin in one of the previous episodes. So feel free to check that out. So I won't go too deeply into the Soka stuff here, but what drew you to Buddhism in high school?
I was born Catholic, and I appreciated the spiritual part of it. I always had the sense that there's something out there, that life is not just like this, and there's something deeper, some meaning. But there was just something about the Catholic religion that just didn't. I don't know what it was. Not a good fit for my personality or something. I hated the idea of an authority, the role of the priest and the kind of church community. I didn't like that. In my experience, a particular priest, just kind of hypocritical. He would talk about some things, but his actions didn't match. But that's not the whole church. That was my experience. I didn't like that. And I didn't like the idea of thinking of something like kind of God is outside. You have to pray or beg or that. I didn't like that attitude. But I knew I had some interest in something, spiritual, and I had the sense that maybe Buddhism would be something I'm interested in, but I didn't know anything about it. I just had some like vague idea of what it was. And a friend of mine in high school, was Buddhist, so I was curious, and I started asking her questions about it, and so in this, she's Soka Gakkai Buddhism is part of, it's a Nichiren school of Buddhism. It's a Nichiren was
Nichiren, yep.
It's a 13th century Buddhist priest or a reformer. So the practice is chanting a mantra.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend, when I was in high school, said that's what you do. So that's the first thing to do to try it is that, and start chanting, maybe like 5 minutes a day. And after a month or so of making this kind of a practice, like a habit, I suppose it's kind of like exercise. It takes a while to kind of you start feeling things. It was I noticed like my mind normally, typically, would just be jumping all over. And I couldn't stop thinking. And sometimes it was quite destructive, like self-criticism, complaints, or inability to focus, just going all over. And I could tell that was making me unhappy sometimes. And after a while of chanting, all of that just sort of kind of fell in place. All of that chaos just kind of, I couldn't explain it, but that was the kind of feeling that I had like a center. And then thinking became clearer. And I thought, that's something that's really interesting. And then I got more serious. I started chanting more and reading and trying to learn more. And then I discovered like the philosophy really, I really instinctively agreed with the philosophy. I was like, oh wow, this is exactly how I think. I just didn't know. Somebody thought of it before, So that's how once that happens, I kind of really got into it. But
wow, that's fascinating. Oh, geez, and this is very consistent with Justin's experience as well when I was chatting to him. So this is now the second time I've heard about this, and I'm thinking, man, I've got to check this out. This sounds really cool. But that's for another time. But no, thank you for that. Okay, so sorry, we digressed a little bit because I was just really curious how you ended up in this Buddhism track, which obviously plays a big part in your life. So just coming back to this, so you were in Argentina studying, you studied graphic design for 3 years, and then you were already part of the Soka Gakkai Buddhist organization. You applied, you got accepted, you moved to California, which would have been a big change,
very exciting,
big decision. Yeah. And then while you were, so from when, after you moved to California, you continued to work as a graphic designer.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
Well, when I was in California, they had such a great, at Soka they had a really great kind of financial aid, so I didn't have to work that much, like it's just, but I had like a here and there, side jobs.
Sure.
But once I moved to New York to go to graduate school, then I took a full-time job as a designer there.
Okay. So at Soka University, what was it that you studied?
It was a liberal arts degree. So
the bachelor's?
It's a bachelor's in liberal arts. And then what that means, I don't know, in Argentina it's not a common degree, liberal arts, and I don't know here or in wherever our listeners are listening from. But a liberal arts degree, which is common in the United States, is a kind of a general education. So you have requirements to take classes from, you have to take, literature and science and social sciences and international relations. You have to take many, many things. And then you focus on something. So my case was, humanities. I did philosophy. But
humanities and philosophy?
The concentration specifically is called humanities.
Right.
So you're expected to take classes in either, literature, philosophy, history, religion, and I did a lot of literature and philosophy classes. But I remember studying and realizing this is what makes me happy.
Wow.
This is what I like. I'm not just learning so that I learn, get some skills so that I can do something in the future. I like it. I like this. It's not just a means to an end. This is what I like.
Fantastic.
So then I figured, oh, how can I keep doing this? You know, like, is there any way to just be student always? And being a professor is the closest.
Wow.
Because you always, get to read, and
Sure.
so that's how I decided I wanted to do that. I like doing that.
How did you decide to choose bachelor in so it sounds like you realized you loved it while you were doing it.
Yeah.
What made you actually choose bachelor in liberal arts? Was that is that the main degree that SOCA offered?
That was the only degree they offered.
Since it was the first, you guys were the first intake.
And and in the United States, there's a tradition of colleges of liberal arts that oftentimes offer only that degree.
Wow.
The idea is that when everybody has a common experience, rather than let me go to university and there are different majors, you go to all the same university, but your experience is totally different. If you study biology, someone study business, it's just you don't take the same classes. It's a different experience. But the idea of liberal arts is that everybody has some kind of common experience of learning.
So interesting. So I guess when you so with SOCA, you decided to go to SOCA. It was more a bit of a sabbatical, like you said. Buddhism being such an important part of your life, but this is an opportunity worth checking out. Essentially,
that's right. Yeah. I mean, it's not a. You might have learned this from Justin, but it's not a Buddhist university. It's totally secular, but. I kind of agreed with. So Ikeda, the founder, he is a Buddhist leader, but he's also a philosopher of education. He writes about education, and he has a whole idea of how education should be. That it's connected to Buddhism, but you don't have to be Buddhist to,
of course,
implement it. Yeah, so the school. But I like that. I like the kind of his ideas about education, and now hoping that the university would be that.
So it wasn't necessarily that you didn't like what you were doing in graphic design. It was more, like you said, it was an opportunity to enrich your life.
Right. So I think the difference was that when I was at the university in Argentina, I just took it for granted that what you do is you take classes and you try to get good grades. You try to learn, and you're doing this as part of your professional path, and you enjoy it. I mean, I enjoy reading things, but in my mind, this is just what I'm doing to get someplace, in my career. But then in California, well, first of all, it was the fact that I didn't have to work, and the fact that there were many things that made it very enjoyable. Away from my parents,
of course,
and so it made it easier to just enjoy it in general. And it was exciting for me too. It's an adventure, abroad, first time, away from home. But there was a conscious. We were literally consciously reflecting about the meaning of learning. It was part of the curriculum in a way. We're learning these things, but also reflecting about how we are changing and what the meaning of all of this is. And then that's when I realized this is not just, I'm not just doing this to go from point A to point B, but the journey itself, the learning, this is what matters. And I had just never had that realization before. And maybe I would have had it. I didn't have to go to California to think that way. It just happened, for me, it happened in that context.
Wow, that's fantastic. Coming back to, so you did Bachelor in Liberal Arts at SOCA University with a focus on humanities. And then you pursued your education. So after that, what happened after that in terms of studies?
So what happened was that was just fascinating, not just with what I learned, but with the whole thing. Like to me, it really was like, I mean, it sounds a little silly now that I think about it, but at the time, just blew my mind. It's like, oh my God, learning. That's what life is all about. That's to me, it was like that. It was like a real realization.
Wow.
That's what life is about. Learning. And, so I wanted to go deeper into that. I wanted to really understand what's going on. Why is learning so important? Or what happens? What happens to a person when you learn? Why have this feeling that it's important or whatever? So I figured, well, to study, these are kind of philosophical questions. I'm not thinking like, oh, how to make, learning more efficient or whatever. I'm not just philosophical questions about the meaning of life. And so I looked up programs, and like the field of philosophy of education was like, I thought this is a field where I could continue pursuing these questions. And I did a bit of research, and I found this program in New York, and it turned out to be great because it didn't turn out to be great. I applied to it because of the connection. So the director of the program, David Hansen, he has worked with Soka. He's interested, he works, he says his line of work is kind of very aligned. And he is like probably one of the top philosophers of education.
Wow.
So I reached out to him, described my experience and what I was thinking, and whether in that getting the PhD in that program, working with him, it would be a place to do this. And he thought it would be a good fit, and that's what I did.
And which university was that?
It's Columbia University in
New York. So you went straight from Soka, and then you applied the following year to Columbia University. So part of my ignorance here again. So from bachelor, you can go straight into a PhD program. Is it that, or do you need to go via a master's or something?
You don't have to. You have a master's. At the time, I applied for a master's program. I just wasn't so ready to commit, or sure, I applied for a master's program. But once I started the master's in New York, it's a 2-year program. And within a few months, not even finishing the first classes that I took, I knew I wanted to stay and do the PhD. So I talked to the professors there, and essentially I never finished the master's. I transferred to the PhD. And
how long was that PhD course?
It took me 9 years.
Wow.
It was for many reasons. I had to work full time. So I was working full time
as a graphic designer.
And also I had a scholarship that the program would support my studies.
Nice.
But it was very small, so I could take only one class at a time. So I didn't, and I couldn't pay out of pocket, So I had to
it's not cheap.
So I was taking one class at a time, and it was fine. I was learning many things along the way. 8 years. Wow, that's a long time.
That's awesome. But I think one of the benefits of, I'll say, not that you have, because I know working full time and doing any amount of study is just like very difficult. But the fact that you could, I guess, focus on one subject at a time would have been helpful in some respects.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
So you can focus and think, and concentrate on that. All right. So Gonzalo and I, we were sipping on some coffee and H2O, and then we've just upgraded our beverage to some good old beer. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
I'm loving this conversation. Oh, gee, that's good.
Right.
Some good old Stella from Belgium. I felt better. Yeah. Should have brought the beer out earlier. But yes, we love our beer. All right, continuing on. So degree. So you went from Bachelor of Liberal Arts to a PhD in at Columbia University in New York. And what was the focus for your PhD?
So it's a PhD in philosophy and education, and I wrote my dissertation on education for global citizenship.
Ah, right. So that was your.
That's right. So that research started with my work when I was a PhD student.
And I think it's fantastic you can actually continue that research.
It's
brilliant.
It's the typical thing, because when you write a dissertation on something, you become kind of an expert in it.
Of course.
And it's just so hard to become an expert in it. So just keep going. Just use it. You know?
You've invested all that energy. And if you're passionate about it, even better. So
that's right.
Oh, that's great. For our listeners out there who are thinking about pursuing a similar career in this field, is there any particular advice that you would give them? If I was to flip it, if they'd come to you and say, I want to do what you're doing, Gonzalo.
Yeah.
Can you give me some advice? What would you say to them?
My advice would be, see, the field of educational research, it's blossoming because education is not going away, and education is changing. So technologies are changing, societies are changing. We need new ways of thinking about it. That's going to stay. But philosophy as a field is shrinking, just in terms of like jobs. Yeah. So it's risky to go into that field. I think it's important for someone to be aware of that, and pursue it if you know that's you're so passionate about it that you're willing to take the risk of struggling as a career. I mean, I'm lucky that I'm doing this, but it's a very small market for that. But you can do really interesting work, philosophical work about education at the intersection of other fields that have a lot like healthier markets. Technology of education, people doing work with education and cognitive science, like understanding kind of what happens in the brain with different when we're learning something. Those are fields that have a lot more. Or even if you do something like teacher education or early childhood education, those are fields that are kind of growing as markets.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is philosophy on its own, although it's very interesting, it's very difficult to get work in that area. But education is a blossoming area because it's not going away. And you can, if you combine philosophy and education, then since education itself, the education component will help sort of assist in you being able to continue to, I guess, practice philosophy in that situation.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So I'm curious, just if we took the education stuff out, and here it's I'm showing my ignorance again. If you have a bachelor in philosophy, whatever type of philosophy, it's not so important here. What, other than being a professor or a lecturer at university, are there any jobs out there in just philosophy?
No.
Right.
So
Okay.
to work as a philosopher means that you write and publish philosophy, or you teach. Now, people with philosophy degrees get all kinds of jobs. They're valuable degrees. For example, people argue as the best ABA. Sorry, a Bachelor of Philosophy is the best preparation for law school.
Oh.
The highest LSAT scores are philosophy majors. So the entrance exam for law schools in the US. It's a great degree to go into business because of you have a lot of training in kind of critical thinking and logic and all that. But all of those fields are not philosophy. Like, studying philosophy might be good for that, but you're not working as a philosopher.
Right. So so it's a great tool to have.
Right.
As part of other careers, so to speak.
But to work as a philosopher, getting paid, it's, pretty much. Maybe, I don't know who gets paid to do philosophy, and it's not teaching in the university. Or publishing. Yeah. I mean, even publishing books. You have to only if you are very famous. Exactly. You can do that only for a living. You know,
because put it this way, without knowing too much about it, but philosophy is something that I personally would love to study more, because it's just the little bit that, and my wife always tells me, man, you would love that area, and that's one of the reasons I was looking so forward to having this conversation with you, because it's an area which I know so little about. Yet it sounds, the little that I've had exposure. The little exposure I've had to it, it's just fascinating. Like, it's just like, wow, I would like to delve more into it. But for many reasons, lack of time, laziness, whatever you want, I have not. So, but, okay, that's interesting. Because I was always curious, with the Bachelor of Philosophy, what on earth could you do with it? But you've clarified that for me, which is great. Now, so I guess that is your advice. You don't think that you're going to go out and be earning the big bucks through philosophy, but it's a great tool that you can have, and education is an area that's always going to be around.
There are some fields, philosophy, art, music, or sports, for example, that many people are very passionate about these fields, but they all have the same quality, which is that very few, very, very few really make a living doing those things. And you gotta be really exceptionally good and lucky.
Exactly.
At the same time.
Yes.
But it's not a bad idea to say, well, I love art. I know it's very hard to make a living as an artist.
Right.
But what are careers that have healthy markets? You can get a job where you can do something. Like you can implement kind of artistic ways of thinking into the job.
But that's interesting. So I there's the little that I read, there seems to be a realization the importance of creativity in work, whatever, in many occupations. So, of course, say in business, an MBA is considered very valuable, but I've been seeing a lot more emphasis where apparently a lot of consultancy firms and I guess your high-end, sort of high-achieving industries are also looking for people who have degrees in fine arts, and painting, and other and philosophy and things like that, where creativity is cultivated and nurtured, and that seems very, very essentially consistent with what you're saying. And I guess the value of that is not necessarily appreciated, since, like you said, you're not necessarily going to be earning a living through that subject matter, but that is something that will help you do something else much better in a greater capacity. Yeah.
And I think in general, this is beyond any field like philosophy or whatever. I think in general, it's a good thing for young people to think imaginatively about their careers. The straight path of going to the university, picking a major, graduating with that degree, getting a job in that field, and progressing in your career that way, it's becoming less and less common. People's career just it's not a straight line. You go in all different kinds of directions, and many people end up making a life for themselves that it was not part of any already pre-made path. So in that, because that's a possibility, is I think it's good for people to think not just in terms of I like this field or like that field, but think what are the kinds of things I like to do. I like to think critically. I like aesthetic things. I like things beautiful. I like to think visually. I like interacting with people or not. I like to keep to myself and follow set goals and just try to achieve whatever it is. And then once you're aware of that, like yourself, who you are, you can create a path. Maybe you're lucky that a particular career that is already set up in a way is a perfect match, and the labor market is healthy and you can get a job. But if it doesn't happen, people make their lives in all kinds of ways. Does it make sense at all?
It does, actually. It very much does, and it's this is maybe a nice little segue actually to one of the last questions I'll ask in this work segment, which is and I think for you in particular, since you're passionate in your current work, I'll be interested in what you have to say about this. So, but I'll ask the question, and the question is: if you could do it all over again, what different occupational career do you think you would have pursued? You do it all over again, based on what you know.
One of the things about getting old is that when you're young, you're all 100% possibility.
That's right.
And nothing is actual. No actuality. Everything is possibility. And that could be very frustrating because I remember being very impatient about wanting to do something, have accomplished it, such as something real. But then, as you live your life, you make choices, and with every choice you make, you give up on things. That's what make a choice means. You decide, I have 10 options, and out of those options, I pick one. It means you're giving up on 9, and like that. So along the way, there are all these paths, this possible person I could have become, and I chose not to. So if I could do it all over again, I would choose one of those. Not because I think it would be better or regret. It's just because I'm just so curious. What would have happened?
And what?
So for me, I've always was interested in politics. I've always wanted to be it's just so fascinating with politics and
a politician.
Getting involved in some way. I don't know.
What is it about politics that you find fascinating?
I suppose it's the same thing I find fascinating about philosophy. It's just this engagement with history. This sense that what you do with your life has a kind of it's connected to history. What's going on in the world or something.
I guess, yeah, you're right. Politician, you effectively can make more of an impact on history as well.
Right. I mean, it's a question of power, right? You could also be a politician and never made it past a local level. So you are thinking about fixing potholes or whatever. It doesn't feel very historical.
Yeah, right. But also, but a very important role
very important.
In the community, of course.
That's right. But it's just a question of, I'm not saying it's more important. It's a question of temperament. I always like that idea of a big picture. long term. I just like it.
Very cool. I am just going to bring up a question that you brought up earlier on in the conversation, and I think you've answered it already. But I want to just ask the question again to see if there's anything different, and there may not be. And that is the question that you raised: what is the purpose of life? Now you mentioned learning, but if someone was to ask you that question, Gonzalo, or should I say Dr. Gonzalo, since you have the doctorate. Gonzalo, what is, to you, the purpose of life? How would you respond to that? Because it's a very difficult question to answer from my perspective anyway. Because I think it's something that you have thought about potentially quite extensively. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on what is the purpose of life.
One way to think about it, one way I think about it, is that rather than like there being a purpose in life that we have to sort of discover and pursue, it's something we make. Now that doesn't mean that kind of anything goes. I decide, well, the purpose of my life is going to be making as much money as I can. And then I pursue that, and that's just as good as any other thing. When we think of purpose, part of what comes to mind is the idea of sort of fulfilling the nature of something. So you say, well, fulfilling a function, or so the purpose of a hammer is to push a nail into a wall or wood or whatever, and in a way, once you do that, it makes the hammer make sense. Once you let's say you didn't know what a hammer is for, you're using it to prop a wobbly table up, or you use it as a paperweight or whatever, and then it's like, sure, it does the work, but what does it have its shape? Just things they don't make a whole lot of sense, and then somehow someone shows you this is what you use it for, and boom, you hammer the nail, and now that makes everything makes sense. That's why. That's the purpose. So I think when we say the purpose of life, it's gotta be something like that. You live your life in a way that things all of a sudden make sense. That's why we are like this. That's why we are mortal. That's why we have desires, but also limitations, and just to live a life in a way that what we are makes sense. And it seems to me that, for example, when we are so obsessed with and I notice in Korea it's like the US in that sense, some concept of success. We pursue success, and when we live our lives that way, just our humanity doesn't make a lot of sense. For most of us, we are not, if we were kind of perfect, some kind of ideal, perfect person, then that would make sense, but we are not, none of us is, and then getting old and dying doesn't make sense in that, just a lot of things are just problematic. I think the purpose of life is going to be something like that, like you live a life in a way that your life becomes meaningful. And I think in the end, it's gotta do with two things. One is understanding who you are. I think we've been getting a lot of self-deception, and there's a lot of suffering that comes from that. And I think living our lives in a way that we come to see who we are clearly. Learning about ourselves, accepting ourselves, loving ourselves, that's important. From a Buddhist point of view, that means this is kind of a question of faith in Buddhism, or as a doctrinal question, as a principle. But the idea is that, in principle, everybody inherently has, Buddha nature. It's not going to happen that you're going to do the work of understanding who you are and then discover that somehow you are really wrong and something really awful is happening. Like, the whole point is, the principle is that if we do that, if we live that way with the goal of understanding who we are, we will discover that each one of us has some sense of dignity and beauty and all that. So I think that's part of it. Getting past all the lies we tell ourselves about who we are. And I think another one is connections. Just living our lives in a way where we connect meaningfully with other people, with life, with the world, and that's how, I mean, not many of us do that well. We isolate ourselves in many ways from people, from nature.
Interesting. So if I was to sum that up, essentially you're saying there's two aspects. One is coming to understand and accepting yourself, which, like you said, is a lot of people find very difficult. And the second one is connecting with others in a meaningful way. Those two are, I guess, key areas in when you start thinking about what is the purpose of life, the meaning of life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think if
Cool.
a person who accomplishes those two over a lifetime, you could say this is a meaningful life.
Thank you. I mean, that's such a hard question, and I sort of put you on the spot there, but I think you summed it up in a really
You summed it
nice
up.
way.
I am glad you gave me a chance to think about it.
No, it's
in that such focused way.
In many respects, I think I avoid that question a lot of the time, because in some respects it also can be quite scary, because it sort of makes you question what you've been doing and why you've done things in certain ways, and it sort of you can end up challenging yourself, because it really makes you think long and hard about, crap, what am I doing with my life right now? I'm not that, and we I think so many of us, or perhaps the majority of us, think about that, and I'm sure many of us can't even answer that question. What is the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? We all have our ideas. We have vague ideas of what it could be or what it might be. It's very hard to articulate, I think, in any form. And so it's always, I think it's a question, since it's such a hard question to give an articulate response to, I think many of us avoid it. So what do you do when you have this feeling that, oh my God, this is scary, I don't want to think about it. What do you do? I feel that way. Yeah, no, exactly. And rather than avoiding it, if anything, we should think about it and attack it. What is it? Not walk away, but confront it head on and actually work out what's going on. Excellent. Okay, so that's essentially it for the work component. As per usual, we've gone way over time, but I think that's a good thing, because there's so much to talk about. In fact, I've got all these other questions I want to ask as well, but I will not, because we need to move on. And I only have Gonzalo for a limited amount of time, so I have to let him go. And that's it for episode 13. In the next episode, we change it up and talk rest and play with Gonzalo. That is, what he does to chillax and recharge outside of work. And that episode is also heaps of fun, and so check it out when you get a chance. Also, if you've been enjoying the episodes and you'd love to support the show, there is a way. You can become a patron via patreon.com. That is patreon.com. And you can find us by searching for We Work, Rest and Play, all one word, from the Patreon homepage. You'll gain a bunch of exclusive access and benefits, so definitely worth checking out. Every little bit of support is a huge help and goes a very long way in keeping this show alive. And of course, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast to make sure you automatically receive new episodes, and if and when you feel like it, it would be great if you could spend just a few seconds to leave a review to let me know what you think about the episode and the show. You can also refer to the website, weworkrestandplay.com, for the show notes, and we shall continue talking with Gonzalo as we move on to rest and play in the next episode. And so until then, live life, take care, keep smiling. The intro and outro music is an extract from the track entitled Falling Down by the artist named Ryan Little and is used in accordance with the Creative Commons Attribution License. Thank you very much, Ryan. Further references can also be found in the show notes at www.weworkrestandplay.com.